And if ultimately, if everything we are doing is to seek happiness, inner peace, fulfillment, whatever the word you want to use, this is how you get there, right? The quiet desperation that so many of us are living in is because we are so scared to leap off a cliff for fear that we will fall and get hurt. But in life, you're going to get hurt. Whether, I always like to say, if you don't seek out a worthy struggle, struggle will find you anyway. You're going to suffer in life one way or the other.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Thrive State Podcast. I am your host, Dr. V, triple board certified MD and performance and longevity expert. And on today's podcast, I give you someone with a invaluable tool to be able to take the fears in our life and transform them into freedom. Now, before we get into the podcast, this is a place where every week I get an opportunity to interview and pick the brains of thought leaders and experts in the world of biology, epigenetics, relationships, and human potential to get you to your next level. If you are new to the podcast and want to kickstart your journey into performance and longevity, please check out my free resource at thrivestatestarter.com. And if you are returning to the podcast, let me first thank you for really being a part of this journey and being a part of a movement to elevate humanity and elevate our human potential. If you haven't done so already, you can help this show and our movement grow by subscribing to the podcast and sharing this episode with your friends and family members. Also, if you haven't already, pick up my book, Thrive State, at thrivestatebook.com. There you will receive the framework and the pillars in life you could focus on to really change and elevate your state, because your state, your energy, is not only the energy you give to every single cell in your body, but that's the energy you interact with life with. And if you could shift that energy, you will really be able to step into a new identity and step into a new personal reality, one that I believe that you've been dreaming of. So on to today's podcast, we actually introduced to you a former Marine and explorer of the human soul. I had an opportunity to meet him at a health and wellness conference where I was the opening keynote speaker and he was the closing keynote speaker. He is none other but Akshay Nanavati, a speaker and ultra runner and the author of a powerful book, Fearvana, a work that has been endorsed by the Dalai Lama himself. He is someone that has overcome PTSD, addiction, and suicidal ideation and built a life devoted to reframing suffering as a doorway to meaning. Whether he's dragging a 190-pound sled across a polar ice in Antarctica or navigating the jungles of his mind, he is living proof that fear isn't something to avoid, but a path to transcendence. Today, we'll unpack how to train your nervous system to embrace fear, rewire your relationship with adversity, and alchemize pain into purpose. Ladies and gentlemen, please enjoy this podcast conversation with myself and Akshay Nanavati. Akshay Nanavati, welcome to the Thrive State Podcast, brother.
Thank you so much for having me, man. Honor to be here.
I can't wait to dive into this concept because, so many people are really kind of talking about how to elevate to next levels of themselves. And I think what you have in terms of a mindset to approach and tackle fear is going to be so juicy for our listeners. But before we get into the podcast, there's a section of this show called the 5 to Thrive. 5 questions, 30-second answer max.
All right.
To get to know you a little bit deeper.
Love it.
And we'll guide our podcast. 1,000 points each. Are you ready to play?
Yes, sir.
The 5 to Thrive. Question number 1 is, what do you fear most now?
What do I fear most now? Death.
Ooh.
I fear death, and that helps me live a more fulfilling life and bring more flavor and squeeze out as much of life as possible.
Amazing. Question number 2 is, what one quote, book, or concept entered your life that completely took it to the next level?
Man's Search for Meaning. It's a book I'm sure many of us, I read that first in Iraq. I was going through some struggles being in a war zone, and then I reheard it when I was in Antarctica, and that book, it constantly helps me reframe my relationship to my own suffering and charge forward in the face of it.
Amazing. Check out that book. The author is Viktor
Good
Frankl,
point.
Holocaust survivor, physician. I quote his work a lot. Question number three is, if I were to give you a mic in front of 100,000 people to sing a song, number one, would you fear that? Number two, what song would that be?
I would fear that tremendously. I'm not a good singer. Uh, and the immediate one that comes top of mind is probably one of the songs that touches my soul the most is Bruce Springsteen's Paradise.
Oh, amazing.
A song really touches my soul.
Question number four is, what currently lights your life up now?
I love public speaking, sharing my message, and working on 2 books. Those are my world, and it lights me up sharing this with others.
Last question for all the marbles, which means if you win this, the next time we meet, a healthy meal on me. And the question is, how would you like to be remembered?
The words I want on my tombstone are, "He wandered the world with human heart to doctor the sick with human soul."
So good. I feel that. Akshay, it is a pleasure to connect. Whenever you're out doing your work, one of the most beautiful things that happens is you connect with people that just resonate with your soul. And Akshay and I met at a high level conference that brings founders in the health and wellness space together called Consumer Health Summit. We were both speakers. I was the opening keynote speaker, and Akshay was the closing keynote speaker. And I regretfully wasn't able to attend because I was leaving to go to Bali to do a amazing retreat, which I can't wait to tell the audience more about as well. But this is all about you. And before we kind of dive into the story, I just want people to kind of know just the things that you've been known for in terms of conquering fear. I mean, can you tell us about maybe like the top 3 fearful moments that you've been through? Then we're going to unpack and figure out what type of man initially would put himself into these situations. But let's talk about that. We know Antarctica, we know the war, in your mind, what are the top 3?
Going to war ranks up there. I spent 7 months in Iraq as an infantry non-commissioned officer. I've spent 100 days alone in the polar regions. Most recently, it was 60 days alone, dragging a 420-pound sled on an expedition so hard that it had never even been attempted before. So one of the toughest polar expeditions in modern history. And then the other one was my fear of stillness. I've spent 17 days completely alone, sitting in a dark room, so dark you cannot see your hand in front of you. And I think confronting that fear of stillness was one of the more challenging ones as well, because I used to struggle with solitude to the point that I would drink a bottle of vodka every time I was alone. That's how I went from that to spending 117 days completely alone, either in the polar regions or in darkness over the last couple of years.
And many people would listen to this and say, okay, well, I certainly have my own fears, but those are next level fears, and I don't know if I can get myself through them. What have been sort of like the major takeaways after going through these experiences of your relationship to fear and why you did what you did?
Great question. I'd say the biggest one is this realization that actually I think this is what summarizes the essence of all of the takeaways on how I move through fear and struggle, is a concept that I now call the paradox of oneness. And what this is, it is the realization that the entire human experience, our life, everything, is this dance of opposites. And we often demonize one side as bad. So there's stress and recovery, pain and pleasure, darkness and light. And what this realization of the paradox of oneness is, it's the concept that these two opposites are not in fact opposite. They're not contradictory, but two expressions of the same whole. And we can find greater peace, freedom, even mastery at whatever our chosen craft is by no longer resisting or clinging to either side of any edge, but embracing and even exploring every edge as a pathway to our next evolution. So in a very concrete way, what that means is, when I used to be someone who was terrified of everything. I mean, heights, open water, tight spaces, everything. So I went and played on that edge. And then I went so far into the edge of embracing struggle, embracing fear, embracing stress, that I actually went to the extreme that I struggled with joy. And I struggled with fun and light and play. So I went onto the edge of playing on the edge of light and fun. And by playing on every edge of the human experience, you find not only greater levels of peace and freedom, but life becomes more flavorful. You can't have a summit without a valley. You can't have pain without pleasure, and vice versa. So it's the realization that now when I move through fear or move through anything I do, it's that nothing is bad or good. They all just are. There is the human experience is just it is. And what creates unnecessary suffering is our resistance or clinging to what is. And that's what allows me to move through the highs and the lows of life, is accepting, embracing, exploring what is to ultimately create what I want to be in my own reality.
Mm. I'm going to unpack that a little bit further next, but let's talk a little bit about your upbringing. Who was Akshay as a kid, and how did he get to desire to want to go into the military? And as I recall, this was a very fluke moment that someone like yourself even made it into the military. So let's talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that.
So I grew up with great parents. I had, middle class. Now they're doing well off, but middle class at the time. And we moved from India to Singapore to Austin. When I moved to Austin, I got very heavily into drugs, into alcohol. I again had a good life, but I had moved to 4 different cities, 3 different countries in 13 years, and so I was lost. I didn't have clarity on who I wanted to be. And I was always kind of this person willing to explore the edge, but at the time, my drugs became my expression. I take responsibility for my behavior, but as a young child, I got in a group of friends, drugs, and so I was the guy pushing that line. Lost 2 friends to addiction, was going down that path until that fluke moment. I saw the movie Black Hawk Down. That movie planted the seed that changed my life. Watching these men sacrificing their lives for another human being, it made me question this very selfish, worthless existence I was living. And almost overnight, I stopped doing drugs and decided to go in. But it took a long time to go to the Marines because I have flat feet, I have scoliosis, I have a blood disorder that 2 doctors told me would kill me in boot camp. So I had to fight my way to get into the Marines. It took about a year and a half, but and the only reason I got in because it was a post 9/11 world. So here's a young kid who wants to go Marine Corps infantry. They found a way for me. Uh, and I'm grateful they did. It was an experience that changed my life. I loved that experience. Obviously, many, many hard moments, but being a part of that brotherhood and that tribe where my well being was secondary to my men and my mission was profoundly beautiful to live in that world. And it shaped everything I am today.
Tell us a little bit about that. What did it take to feel deeply connected to other people and sort of like let go of who you are? I mean, I think that's one of the things that our society is truly facing is a culture of disconnection, of recognizing there is so much stress that that people are on. But I mean, so much of that stress is just reflecting on their own fear and survival mechanisms that are in their mind. And sometimes they feel like, I can't even disconnect because I'm barely surviving. How were you able to tap into that? Or what was it about the Marine Corps culture that allowed you to think bigger than yourself?
At first, it's forced upon you in the sense that in boot camp, when somebody does something wrong, everybody gets punished for it.
Mm,
And so they're training you right from the get-go that there are consequences because the application was in war, for example. Let's say I'm on post and I fall asleep. I could be the one that lives and my men are going to die. So right from boot camp, they ingrain this mentality that you are going through this experience as one. If you screw up, everybody's going to suffer for it, and vice versa, right? If somebody else does, we're all going to suffer together. So that builds that mentality. And while it's hard at moments, it feels unfair. You're like, I didn't do anything. Why are we getting punished, right? But it builds that mentality, and it is really beautiful. Again, while there are many hard moments, even in war, I didn't want to go on mission because you're tired, you're exhausted, but you go. And that really ingrains this mentality that life is about something bigger than just us. Like, yes, we've done a lot wrong in the military, and God knows we're seeing a lot of chaos happening right now in the world, and we shouldn't have gone into Iraq. All that I'm not taking away from. But separate from the politics of the war, on the ground, whether it be in war or in training, we were there to serve each other. And so while it is really hard in moments, it shows you the power of transcending yourself for something bigger and what that does even for yourself. You can rise above so much more than what we think we are capable of. It also reduces your own suffering, you mentioned, right? So much, I think, of why we're struggling today on an individual level, the kind of malaise in our collective society is a result of truly individualistic thinking. Because when you live for something greater, you rise above your own suffering because you realize there is something out there that's more important than just you. So, I mean, there's a reason for this, right? Like, Abraham Maslow, his highest need was self-transcendence. It wasn't actually self-actualization. And Viktor Frankl, who we mentioned earlier, he says that self-actualization is actually a side effect of self-transcendence. So if this thing that we are ultimately seeking is some flavor of self-actualization, right? Inner peace, fulfillment, whatever you want to call it, self-transcendence is the mechanism to get there. There's research that's shown this, the philosophers, psychologists have shown this, and life experience has validated it. And the Marines showed me the power of transcending myself for something bigger and what that does to how I was able to live my own life from a greater sense of peace as well as push through hard things.
That's amazing. And, I realized this in doing the work in human performance and longevity, that the part of us that transcends the most, both from a physical and biological level, is when we are able to quiet down that version of our brain
Yeah.
that thinks that we live just for us, that fear
Yeah.
survival mode. If
Yeah.
we can quiet that down, because when that thing is on, when we think we are the center of the world and when we're going through all this stress, what we're telling every single cell in our body is that we're in danger. And then it takes basically the energetic resources that would normally be used for health and for good digestion and for optimal performance and shuttles that into, cellular processes for inflammation that eventually creates disease. So recognizing you're part of something bigger, that you don't live as yourself, and that mental shift shifts your entire nervous system and the hormones that float around your body that actually gives you better health. My question to you is, what would you say after what you've been through? I mean, one would say, oh man, it was easy to have this deeper connection with other people because it was almost sort of force fed to you guys. As somebody who's navigating the world today, family members that have their own single family homes, potentially feeling very individualistic, like they just got their own problems that they need to solve in terms of caring for their kids or what that may be. What are some tangible steps that we can do to feel this deeper sense of connection?
It can be as simple as like, I'm going to support a cause, whether it be going out and volunteering your time. Time is the best thing you can give, the most valuable thing. But even donating some money, when you look at other people suffering, it also gives you perspective on your own. And it is understandable to be consumed. We all go through a series of problems, and there's some people that are suffering way more than others. God knows I get that it can feel all consuming when you're, let's say, a single mom working 3 jobs for your kids. But even that is an act of self-transcendence. You're doing that for your kids, right? So whether other is a unit as small as the family or the larger world is not ultimately the point. It's focusing on the other. So what gives a single mom the power to work 3 jobs for is her kids, right? So self-transcendence gives us so much strength. It also helps us rise above our own suffering. And the power of perspective is not meant to deny your own pain. So when we're in pain, it's not like, oh, that person's having worse, so I'm not allowed to feel pain. That doesn't help. It's actually saying I'm allowed to feel what I feel, because whether you have a $0, you're in war, or you have $1 billion, we're all going to go through the human experience. And that means moments of pain. And it's okay to feel that. In fact, coming back to the point of acceptance of isness, accepting the pain is what allows you to transcend it. But perspective gives you the power to rise above that pain, right? And even today, I mean, I've been to war zones. I've worked with survivors of sex trafficking, former child soldiers, people in extreme poverty. I still think about that when I'm suffering, whether I was suffering in Antarctica or struggling to build my business or writing a book, whatever it may be. There's people who have it a lot worse. And so I'm going to feel what I feel and use that fuel. But this is what allows me to transcend it. So I think practical steps is using perspective as a weapon. And it's as simple as like talking to yourself about it, giving access and exposure to it, or donating your time, your money, seeing that there are people out there who are worse off, and using that to help you say, I will keep rising up in service of my family, my kids, the world, the community, whoever that other is. It gives you, and the neuroscience has actually shown this, even when you think about your goals from the lens of others, it helps increase oxytocin. And they've done a lot of studies on this. It actually improves how people perform in a job interview if they think about their job from the lens of how it'll help others versus how it'll help myself. So on a very practical way, it actually improves your performance by thinking about how this thing will help others.
I hope you're enjoying the podcast so far. If you are, I just wanted to let you know, join our community. There's so many free resources and a great community of people that desire health, happiness, human potential, to have more in their life, more health, more energy. And when you have those two things together, you could create more happiness, more abundance, whether it be financial, romantic, all these things in your life. And if you're just starting out, you don't know where to go, just sign up for ThriveStateStarter.com, because in there you're going to get a bundle of information that includes a longevity ebook, a longevity and performance resource guide, lecture notes that come from my keynotes at Google, at Fortune 500 companies, all the insights in that keynote in lecture slide form given to you. And then finally, breathwork. I share 3 powerful breathwork exercises to access calm, which really gives you clarity and peace during the day, to access energy if you need to wake up and really motivate yourself, and finally a breathwork routine that you could do every single morning so that you could be very intentional with how you create that day. You could find all this stuff delivered free to your inbox at ThriveStateStarter.com. And our community is growing. If you want to be a part of a community of people that desire the Thrive State, that are really in Thrive State themselves, and help other people along with that, you could be a part of the community. You can get group coaching from me. We do breathwork sessions, meditation sessions, and you also get to drop in and participate in podcasts in the future. You could find more about the community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. So check out those resources. You're not going to be disappointed. And please enjoy the remainder of this podcast.
Amazing. How then did you come from somebody leaving the Marines to then deciding, I'm going to do this trip that no man has done before? And as I was looking at you earlier, I was noticing part of your finger being missing.
Yeah.
That came from that Antarctica trip, correct? And so what was the impetus of doing that, at that point in time?
So after joining the Marines, the Marines exposed me to the power of the human spirit to transcend what's hard. And so I now wanted to explore that further. That got me into outdoor sports because, as I mentioned, I used to be scared of everything. So I was scared of heights, so I went rock climbing, skydiving, mountain climbing. Scared of tight spaces, so I went caving. I was scared of open water, so I went scuba diving, cave diving. And the outdoors became a playground to explore my fears and ultimately the limitlessness of the human potential that lives inside of all of us. After Iraq, I really struggled, depression, drinking, PTSD. One woke up one morning after 5 days of binge drinking and was seconds away from slitting my own wrists. And coming out of that abyss is what got me big time into outdoor sports, and especially endurance sports. I love endurance sports because they send you to the edge of your mind in pain, because you have to navigate pain for such extended periods of time, which got me into polar travel, which in terms of voluntary suffering, there is nothing like it. Like, I've done a lot of hard things, and like polar travel is the heights of voluntary suffering. And so this expedition that I was attempting in Antarctica. It was the last great Antarctic expedition that had not been completed yet, which was a coast-to-coast crossing of the entire continent without using dogs or kites. So the actual goal was to drag this 420-pound sled, 115 days, 1,700 miles. It was so hard it had never even been attempted before, let alone completed, and many adventurers considered to be impossible. And that was the draw. Let's see how far we can explore the absolute edge of the spirit and push into something as hard. I devoted 4 years of my life training to it. I lost 2 fingers on my first training expedition in Antarctica. Spent multiple solo expeditions, 17 days of darkness, all leading up to this journey, which ultimately ended with me being out there for 60 days, 500 miles, literally pushed the body to the brink of death. And because I was dragging the sled uphill from day one in some of the worst snow conditions in modern Antarctic history. I actually truly believe now, after having attempted it, it is an impossible expedition, but it was one that was absolutely worth fighting for and trying, because it was so hard in so many ways. We had to raise $1.1 million from scratch to fund the expedition while training the mind, body, spirit, while preparing the logistics, the gear, the nutrition. It took years of preparation just to get to the starting line. And even out there, it was unforgiving how hard it was. So to answer the question, that was a little context of what got me from the Marines to that was looking for that greatest dragon I could battle, to unearth the greatest treasures of the human soul, treasures that you can only find in the depths of solitude, suffering, away from decadence and distractions and life in this world, away from the masks we wear in to move through society. And I went, and after having done a lot of hard things, this was the hardest in terms of voluntary suffering that I could find. And and I wanted to see what it would reveal about the soul.
Now, when you share this story with people, I I can imagine different camps of reactions to those that are completely inspired by what we can allow ourselves to do versus some that's like, that's great, but that's just crazy, and I'm just destined for, a life of mediocrity because I don't dream to put myself in positions like that. What are you hoping potentially the person listening to this that feels like that amount of suffering might be so much to overcome? How would you say, we can use these teachings to potentially even lead to a graduated system of how they could start to work with potentially challenges and fears and suffering?
What I would hope somebody gets from this, and when I share this, is not to say to go to Antarctica, right? Antarctica is not the only vehicle for enlightenment. It is to invite people to explore their next edge. For somebody, that could be a 5K. It could be writing a book. It could be walking up to a man or a woman at a bar, right? These are all scary, hard things, but it's inviting people to explore their next edge, because on that next edge, whether or not it pays off, like, I didn't ultimately hit the target I wanted to hit, but it was so worth fighting for, because who we become on that process of fighting for that next evolution, it transforms everything about the experience of this adventure that is the human life. And if ultimately, if everything we are doing is to seek happiness, inner peace, fulfillment, whatever the word you want to use, this is how you get there, right? The quiet desperation that so many of us are living in is because we are so scared to leap off a cliff for fear that we will fall and get hurt. But in life, you're going to get hurt. Whether, I always like to say, if you don't seek out a worthy struggle, struggle will find you anyway. You're going to suffer in life one way or the other. So when you seek out that worthy struggle, it makes the suffering worth it. Like, I could have not done this Antarctica and I wouldn't have suffered nearly as much as I did getting to the starting line and in Antarctica. But for me, and this is because of what I believe my path is, that suffering of never having lived my potential is an existential dread, a suffering that I do not want. So we're all going to die one day. Looking back at your life, can you look back at it and actually put yourself in this? I highly recommend people do this, is visualize yourself dying and look back on your life and say, did I give all to this life? Like, the three vehicles I want to measure my life with when I die is my relationships, the impact I've made, and the epic life experiences I've had. So from that lens, am I chasing that, right? And so again, it's not about doing Antarctica. It's about exploring your next edge, because it'll make you come more alive. It'll improve the connection with yourself, the connection with others, and it gives life so much more flavor.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. And as I look at you now, I see this wedding band that you have.
Yeah.
Beautiful. You're in a partnership
Mm-hmm.
with someone,
Mm-hmm.
and you also said yes to something. And I'm pretty sure anybody who is listening has a relationship. It might not be romantic. It could be a relationship to your parents and potentially the people that you work with.
Yeah.
But sometimes saying yes to you means some sort of, I don't know, compromise for other people and their expectations of how much they would like you around, or things like that. Can you talk, like, real talk, the practicality of what it's like to say yes to you, what the conversation was like, and did you get any pushback with the relationships of being able to choose you over these things, and how did all this unfold in the end?
Mm-hmm. When I got together with my now wife, I was actually already training for Antarctica. So we've been together 2 years now. And when we got together, this was already on the cards. I was actually scheduled to go in 2023, 4 months after we met. And so from day one, she was like, we were kind of, I'm in for the ride. And she'll tell you, it's not these things that I do were actually more of a deterrent than an appealing factor. But the thing that drew her to me was the kind of person you have to be to do these things that I do.
Yeah.
So it's not that it was like, oh, I love that he's gone away for 60 days to Antarctica, right? It was the kind of person I had to be, the commitment, the dedication, the will, the fight, the service. We made a lot of impact through this. And the point is, like, chasing your big goal, sometimes it will cause people around you who love you to maybe question you. The things I've done have been challenging to my parents, but they'll be the first to tell you they are so proud of me, because when you live at your highest version of yourself, it makes others around you better. It makes them want to be in your presence. And yes, it may not always be easy, especially if you do the kind of things I do. It's hard for the people who care about me, but they support because they see what it's done for me and the impact I'm able to make as a result of it. So I think, there's a great quote from Howard Thurman, don't ask what the world needs, ask what makes you come alive and go do that, because what the world needs is more people who've come alive.
Yeah.
And I think that really summarizes it. Chase your big goal at your highest level, and people around you will come on board because it changes who you are. Even joining the Marines, it was very hard for my parents. I wasn't a U.S. citizen. I was a green card holder. That was a hard conversation to have. They weren't for it at the time. Now they're so damn proud of me. They've seen what it's done to me. They've seen the impact we've made as a result of the work. So I'd say, chase your big goals from the lens of how does this make me come alive? And it's the duality that can coexist. And how can I use this to make the world better? And when those two dualities, coming back to the paradox of oneness concept, those two dualities you approach of selfishness and selflessness, both can coexist at the same time, you come alive and people around you will want to support that. And
That's amazing.
that's how I built the relationships with my parents, my wife, my friends. We've had such a great tribe thanks to, like, I'm going to chase this big goal and we're going to do it for a bigger cause, but I want to help you. And you can also support people. Like, I support my wife tremendously in her big goals, right? I want her to live her version of herself as well.
Yeah. When you mention this, I am deeply attuned to basically the beauty of life and how interconnected everything is, and how the universe is almost sort of like a fractal reflection of the complexity and the organization of all of life. When I look at a cell with all these organelles and everything like that, I mean, each organelle does its own job, but it does so in the context of working together to make that cell alive.
I love it.
Very similarly, you've got this cell that's working together with tissues to form organs, to form systems that then form who we are.
Yeah.
And it only works if every single cell does its thing, and does its thing so well, but not in the context for itself, but for the context of the greater good. And you brought that, to light, in talking about that, is we are meant to come alive, but we're also meant to bring our aliveness as a deeply interconnecting piece for this organism that is humanity we all belong to.
Absolutely.
And we see that when that's not the case, when we see that people are just living for themselves and fearful of the world and start to isolate themselves, well, guess what? That's how cancer forms in the body, when one cell starts to, be isolating, thinks that it's afraid, thinks it needs to hoard more and not give, to the entire ecosystem. That's cancer. And we've got autoimmune disease where we have groups of our cells attacking other parts of our body because it doesn't know that it's connected to something bigger.
Yeah.
We see that in humanity, unfortunately, now. And so the fact that you said this duality of, transcend yourself, become the best version of yourself, the thing that makes you feel alive, but in the context of, that part is needed so that the entire whole can elevate and evolve.
We all have different vehicles of expression. Like, you have yours, I have mine, and there's not like one is better or worse or right or wrong. We collectively come together to make a sum that is greater than each individual part.
That's amazing. So I'd love for the viewers to leave with something that's, practical in terms of maybe some initial first steps that they can use to really kind of step into a true identity. It's great. And I've known so many people that talk to me about, I know what great feels like. I know what dreaming feels like. And I can move with this energy and intention of figuring out what makes me feel alive for a couple of days, maybe a couple of weeks. This is where sort of like, the dreams of our New Year's resolutions, come to place, and then it falls flat. What's it take to keep the attention and intention of stepping into a new identity, and what does that look like practically, and how do people maybe become a little bit, I don't know if the word discipline is the word to use, or how do they really maintain the consistency to step into a new identity?
I think the most important tool somebody can do to start on this path is to train the muscle of stillness. And this could, and a practical way to apply this, and actually a college kid who was so inspired by my time in the darkness, he went and locked himself in a dark closet for 1 hour. So I'm not saying you have to do that, but you can start with 10 minutes, because there's a great quote from a French philosopher, Blaise Pascal, who said, all of humanity's problem stems from man's inability to sit by himself in a room alone.
Mm.
Why does this matter? When you sit by yourself in a room alone, you can start getting clear on, is the path I'm choosing, is who I want to be, one defined by me, for me by the outside world, or is it one I'm actively seeking? Because if you want to be consistent, I think first you got to get clear on, is this the thing that I want? So you always want to start outcome first. Get clear on that outcome by being still with yourself.
Yeah.
So go sit in a dark, and it will be uncomfortable, especially if you're new to stillness. You can work your way. Like, I could not recommend a darkness retreat enough to anybody. If there's one cure-all, like one silver bullet people ask me, it is stillness. But you don't have to go into 10 days of darkness. To start, do 10 minutes in a dark closet. From there, you get clear. Like you asked me earlier, right? What is your North Star? You didn't use those words, but the words I want on my tombstone. Because I've thought about that. So that's my North Star. So this is what I would invite you to get still and get clear on. Write this down. What is my mission? What's the words I want on my tombstone? What's my philosophy, my ethos? From there, you choose the path. And then from there, now you get clarity on the small action steps, and you break your, like, presence is the key to spirituality. So the reason I was able to be consistent in Antarctica is because I made this mantra, live each day as if it's my entire life. Not so much live its day as if it's your last, because if it was my last day, I wouldn't drag a 400-pound sled through Antarctica. But today is my whole life. There is no yesterday. There is no tomorrow. The biggest reason why people struggle with consistency is two. They don't know what the thing is to do, what the thing they're chasing. And two is because ultimately it's because it's hard. We can go into all the nuances, but really it boils down to it's hard. And there's fear that I won't be able to do this hard thing again and again and again and again. But if there is no tomorrow and there is no yesterday, there is no need for consistency. There's only now. And that's what I constantly do, is when I'm struggling to do something hard, is I don't have to do this tomorrow. If I had a gun to my head, could I do this just today? All of us could, whatever that thing is. So that's what I'd say is stillness, live each day as if it's your entire life, and get clarity on what you're chasing.
Mic drop moment there. And before my very last question, how do people find out more about you and your work, and where do people go to see you speak next?
Fearvana.com, Fearvana. Instagram is at Fearvana, and the book Fearvana is on Amazon, paperback, Kindle as well. And that's where you can learn more about the work and get some tools to help you move through struggle.
Now, I'm guessing potentially your answer to this last question would be stillness. And if it is, you'll have a second to best, or your second answer to this. But with everything that you've gone through in life thus far, what has been your best medicine?
Stillness and suffering. Seeking out suffering. It's a game changer. I'll end it with these quotes from a wiser man than myself, Vince Lombardi, who said, "I firmly believe any man's finest hour, the greatest fulfillment to all he holds dear, is the moment when he has worked his heart out in good cause and lies exhausted on the field of battle, victorious."
So
That's what it's all about.
Let's leave them with one more thing. In that path of suffering, anyone who's just starting out, I mean, no one's going to, go to Antarctica right away, but what does that look like in terms of, attaching the thing, once you have that goal, and what's it look like in the process of suffering? Is it, what are the mindset exercises that's happening, or the process of happening, or is it just doing that thing and recognizing you did that thing?
There's many mental tools. In fact, if somebody's interested on fearvana.com, you can get this tool for free where I have 25 weapons to move through the pain cave, 25 mental tools. So there's many, but I would say one of the core ones is as simple as it sounds, is gratitude. Like, I get to do this. Anybody listening, unless you're in like a war zone, most people don't get to choose their own suffering. We do. That's a privilege. Like, I actually celebrate when I have a business victory. Like a few weeks ago, I had a business wins. And so I celebrated by doing 12 hours on the stepper. Now that people are like, why would you do that? You're suffering more. But it's not the suffering that I seek. The suffering is the means, not the purpose. The purpose is the transcendence. Suffering is a training ground for transcendence. So when you're in it, when you're in the pain cave, acknowledge yourself, feel grateful. I get to do this. I get to tap into the limitlessness of the human spirit that can only be found through this crucible that I'm on. So acknowledge yourself. You know how many people avoid the fight? So when you're in the suffering, tell yourself, I'm in the fight. This is what makes me great. Regardless of how it pays off, I'm choosing to be in the battle today. And that's what makes me legendary. And just that gratitude, that acknowledgement, the self-appreciation will help you move through the pain cave, as I like to call it, in powerful ways.
Oh, what a great way to end the podcast. My friend, your dedication to yourself, the dedication to you becoming the best version of yourself, the excitement for life, the we get to mentality is just a reminder of that this breath is truly, truly a gift. And we get to create more love. We get to awaken more joy. We get to push the boundaries of what is possible because we have this breath. Thank you for that reminder, brother. And thank you for being on the Thrive State podcast.
Thank you so much, brother.
I hope you enjoy that episode of the Thrive State podcast. And if you're finding that this content is really helping you and your family members, please consider supporting our mission and our cause of elevating health, happiness, and human potential for people all over the world. You can do so by making sure that you subscribe to this podcast, sharing it with your friends and family members, and leaving us a 5-star review wherever podcasts are heard. All these things are going to really help elevate the show and to give us the resources to continue to bring more content just like this to yourself as well as the people that you love. If you haven't already, you might want to consider joining our community. We actually have a community where people get to engage with me in group sessions where we do breath work, meditation, where we do challenges together, really to be able to get us access to health, happiness, human potential so that we could have longevity and performance in our life as well. You can check out our community at mythrivestate.com. That's mythrivestate.com. And if you haven't already, pick up a copy of my book, Thrive State. It really gives you all the tools, the pillars that you need to create a blueprint to control the energetics of your life. Who are you? How you show up in the world? The choices that you consistently make create an energy in your body, and you can control this. And when you can control that, you also control the messages you give to your DNA that gives you access, again, to optimal health, longevity, and peak performance. And let me also just share a free gift to you. If you haven't already, please pick up my longevity and performance bundle where I share lecture notes, ebooks, breathwork exercises, and longevity and performance resources at thrivestatestarter.com. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. Thank you for helping us grow. Remember always, my friends, that you are your best medicine.